Welcome to the Business of Cleaning. We are the business podcast for the cleaning industry, and what we do is bring industry expertise straight to your ears every single week. For our April mini season, we've brought on guest Mike Derryberry to talk about an introduction to leadership. Leadership is huge, and it is important that you learn how to leverage it as a success tool for your business. Get ready, sit back, and just listen. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business of Cleaning for our second mini seasons during the month of April. I have Mike Derryberry back here with me, and we're going to continue our talks on leadership. And in this particular episode, we're going to jump in and talk about delegation, the power it has for your team, and why it is not a sign of weakness at all. And so, Mike, I'm going to let you say hi and jump straight in.
How you doing? Haley, I just got a question for you. Have you ever worked for somebody, or maybe you've had friends or you've talked to friends and they've worked for a micromanager? You ever work for somebody that just says, you're like an extension of them, but you really have no freedom, you have nothing? That to me is the definition of a non-delegator, right? Somebody just gonna control everything. So have you
Yeah.
ever worked for somebody like that?
I have. Fortunately, not very often. I've been very lucky to have some good bosses over the years. My 2 or 3 jobs I've had since college, or well, since starting college, I should say. And I have to say, it really sucks. It
Yeah.
is like a moral crusher, and you just feel like, okay, what am I here for if you just want a robot?
Right. Well, and how many times in those situations? Because I think most people have been through that kind of an experience. Um, but how many times have you been in that situation and you've said, I've got a great idea and I think I'd like to, it would make a huge improvement over the things that we're doing and would make everything better, and everybody just shut you down, right?
Yeah. It sucks when you're like, oh, what if we do this? And just everybody's like, why are you talking? They don't. It's a really bad feeling. And then if you do have a really great idea, something that could help make things better, make things more efficient, and it just gets glossed over because it's not coming from your boss.
Right. And this is, the reason I ask these questions is because I think everybody can relate to this, right? I mean, everybody has had at one time or another a situation, and if you were to kind of prime them a little bit, they go, "Oh yeah, I remember when," right? And you go back to that. I think there's a good news and bad news kind of aspect to being an entrepreneur or a small business owner, and it's a situation where typically a business owner or an entrepreneur is really skilled. They're very good at something, whatever it might be. Michael Gerber talks about in his book, The EMyth. He uses the example of this woman who is a great uh, baker. She's really really good, and so she says, "Oh, I'm going to go start a business," right? And so she jumps into the business, and of course, there's a whole lot of other stuff that he talks about in terms of, well, it's about 10% of the business of being a leader, being a business owner is about the thing that you're really good about. And the other 90% is about all the other stuff that has to get done, right? Which we all can relate to as business owners. But I think what happens with an entrepreneur, because they are so good at what they do, that when they get in there, they think that they're really the only ones that can do it, right? And what happens is you stifle the business. About 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long, maybe about 9 years ago or so, I went through that same situation in our business. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't me trying to be a micromanager, but the result was the same thing. It really was a stifling situation. What had happened was basically I noticed a pattern that was happening in our business. What I noticed was we would have these moments of really fast and significant growth, and man, everybody was excited and everything was fun and was things were going really, really well. And then all of a sudden, it was like a complete implosion, and we had nothing but just disaster everywhere. I mean, just like fixing and running around trying to fix problems and one thing after another. And then we would come out of that and we would start doing it again and we would go through this cycle. And after about the third or fourth time this happened, I really sat down and started to figure out what was going on. Well, you know, silly me, I should have really thought about the things that I had been reading and I already knew the answer, but for like most of us, the answer is good for somebody else, but it doesn't apply to me. Yeah, well, guess what? It applies to me. And so I realized what was happening was the illustration I use is like you have two partners and they're holding hands around a tree. And at the beginning, the tree is pretty small. And over time, the tree grows and grows and grows and grows, and that trunk gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it gets to a point where you're barely holding on around this tree. You can barely get your arms around this tree. And if it grows a little bit more, what happens is you lose your grip. Well, guess what? When you lose your grip, things start happening and there's a problem and there's all these issues. Or you hold on so tight that you constrict the growth of the company or the organization, whatever it would be. And I realized that my partner and I had literally been doing that. We have been basically controlling all of the aspects and all the decision making on all of these different areas. Now, we had a fairly good team at the time, and they were good people and stuff, but we were stifling them. We were holding them back because we were trying to make all these decisions. And I finally I came to the realization that, look, I've got to add more leaders. I have to add more people to the mix. Now, that's hard because then you're going, well, they're not going to do it as well as I do. They're not going to do it as fast as I do. They don't know as much as I do. And you know what? That might be true. But there's a rule that I've learned, and that is if the person can do 80% as well as you can, guess what? 80% of what you can do right now trying to do everything is about 120% more than what you're doing right now because they're only focusing on one thing. What I discovered when we did this is it was bumpy in the beginning, but eventually what I discovered was you don't get growth. It's not like you add one person and now we have three people holding hands around the tree. What ends up happening is when you take it off of my plate, because I'm not really given, I may know 100%, but I'm only able to give maybe 30% because I got all these other things I'm doing. By giving it to one person and allowing one person who maybe only has 80% the knowledge and 80% the experience, they're exponentially more capable of bringing success by themselves, focus on that one thing than you can trying to focus on that and 13 other things. Does that make sense? What I'm talking about? So the bottom line is if you let go and give it to some other people, what you're going to find out is that the organization exponentially grows, not addition. It's not just adding one, it's multiplying, right? So I mean it's a scary thing for an entrepreneur to let go because it's their baby, right? I mean, they just don't want to let go. But here's the harsh reality is if you don't, you're going to constrict the business. And you possibly could end up doing more harm than good.
Well, and as a leader and an entrepreneur, a lot of these people they got to where they are because they're really great learners, and learning and keeping up with what's going on in the world and one step ahead even is part of why they find success. But if they're too busy trying to stay afloat, they can't learn. So if they're able to share and give responsibility, not only are they opening themselves up to continue to learn, but now they're enabling somebody else to take that job, take that 80% or wherever they're at, and potentially surpass you in it because that's all they're focused on. So maybe if you were only focusing on it, you could do, it the specific way really, really well. And they can't do it quite that level when they start. But in 2 years, 3 years, they might be doing even better than what you could have back then.
Well, yeah, and that's a very good point. What I have found is that the people I talk to, the business owners that I have the privilege and the opportunity to mentor at times, what they think, the mistake that they make is they think that their method is the only way to do it. It's the right way. Well, guess what? It was the right way for you to do it. The method isn't the issue. It's the end result that's the focus. So if Joe over here can do it a completely different way, but get to the same result, and he can get there faster and we can get better results, why wouldn't we want them to do that? Right? But we get so hung up on it's my idea, I learned it this way, and we get stuck into this where we talked about, the last time, this fixed mindset is it's got to be done this way. No, there's about 50 different ways it can be done. At the end of the day, let's get it to get the results. That's what our focus needs to be. So we've got to shift our thinking away from how we do it to what our end result needs to be. And if I could say anything to business owners is let go. I mean, it's when I finally got to the place where I was able to let go, it finally dawned on me that a leader's responsibility and a leader's job is not to manage all these people. It's not that's not my job. Is the definition I learned, and I don't even know where it came from. I don't know who said it, but it basically is this: your job as a leader is to create an environment where other people can succeed. That's your job as a leader. You create an environment of trust. You create an environment where people can experiment. You create an environment where people want to be there, that they are on board with the whole mission and the whole idea of your business and of what you're about, and let them go. It's amazing to me when you see these really, really creative people and they're just being micromanaged and the life is coming out of these people. And if you would just step back and give them the vision and create an environment for them to explode, I'll bet you what you're going to find is they're going to be better at it. They're going to be more successful at it. And that means the business is going to be more successful if you just let them go, if you just let them do their thing. And unfortunately, I see this happening all the time. People just go, oh, but I can't. It's got to be my way. And you got to hang on and hang on and hang on. Well, that doesn't always work. In fact, what ends up happening is the company suffers, people move on, and you go through the process over and over and over again. What was it Einstein said? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again.
And expecting
getting
different
this and
results.
expecting a different result. Well, you're not getting a different result. You're going to get the same thing over and over and over again. And unfortunately, I see that's what happens because they built this thing, and so they're protective of it. But it's like raising kids. I mean, at some point, they turn 18, and they're an adult. You got to let them go. You got to hope that everything you've done up to that point is good, and you've done as much as you can, and then let them go. Doesn't mean you don't get nervous and worried about them, but you've got to let them be their own person, and that's kind of the way it has to be with a business. At some point, you've got to let your people do their thing. Trust that they are going to get us where we want to be. And by the way, if you don't trust them, why are they working for you? I mean, really, think about that for a second. I've got people I can't trust to do the job that I've hired them to do. Well, then why did you hire them? Right? It doesn't make sense. So honestly, if you as a leader have hired these people and you hired them because they had these skills, then let them demonstrate their skills. Create the environment where they can succeed, because their success is going to be translated into success for the organization.
Exactly. And, I read something the other day when it comes to like that parenting aspect of There are parents who micromanage and do this exact same thing that these leaders are doing with their teams. And somebody said, your kids know where they want to go. It's the same with your team. Your team knows who they are, who they're going to be, where they're going to go in life. And you can even enable and support them and be along for the ride, or you can be the ones that get left behind because they're going to do it. And it's just like at one point, your employees are going to be the same. If you're creating this toxic environment by micromanaging and trying to fit them in a box because they're not doing it exactly your way, your team is going to go somewhere where they can thrive and they're going to do better and they're going to do great and they're going to bring success somewhere, but they're going to leave you behind in the process. So,
Yeah, I think that it gets kind of back to what we talked about the first week, which was this whole idea of purpose and values, right? If you as a leader are hiring people that are in alignment with your purpose and values, and ultimately your mission as well, right? Where are we going? What are we going to be doing the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it might be? If there's alignment there from the beginning, their end result, I mean, their end goal is the same. I mean, you've already established where we're going, and they bought into that. Great. But how we get there sometimes is where we get hung up, right? And I think having the ability to allow people to have input and allow people to, come and influence you. What was it? I think Robert Redford. It's interesting. Robert Redford, when he would do the Sundance, conferences every year. I don't remember the quote exactly, but he in effect basically said, "I want to be influenced by you. I'm going to tell you what I think, but I want you to tell me what you think. I want to be different when I leave than when I came. I want to be changed." Right? They all had the same objective. They all had the same purpose, but he wanted to learn something. You talked about learning earlier. I can't tell you, I have learned things from my team over the last 8 or 9 years. When I finally, got my head around this idea, I have learned so many things from them, things that I should stop doing, things that I should do better, things that will help the organization. Um, it just allows you the freedom to be the leader you need to be. It's not a question of, my way or the highway. It's a question of, well, do we want to get down the highway? Right? I mean, do we want to get someplace? Well, yeah, we do. Well, then let's get everybody on board. And the more people feel that ability to express themselves, the more loyal those people are, the more committed to the mission that those people are, to the vision of the company, right? But without that freedom and without that sense of trust, they're just what you just said a minute ago. They're going to go find someplace else. They're going to look for another place. And then what you're looking at is churn, churn, churn. You're rotating through like a turnstile, running through people. And this is, I hear this all the time. Well, I can't seem to keep good people. Well, maybe you ought to stop doing what you're doing and think about how you're working and what kind of an environment you're creating that would cause them to move on, to push them out.
I couldn't agree better. I just think of it's like you said, we've all had that type of boss at some point or another. We've all worked in that team with that type of leader, that person who's got to have their hand in everything. It's their way, or you're going, or the highway, like you said. And it splashes and it creates that toxicity that it just is very, instead of building up and growing, then you're destroying. And you're kind of stunting potential and things like that until they're off somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you can actually encourage, support, enable, and do all the things that we've talked about over the last couple episodes that leaders should be doing, actually leaders have to do to be an actual leader, then you're going to create a community in your own business. And that's unique because communities, when they love where they are, they naturally will find ways to build and grow. And sometimes that's outside of just the normal productivity stuff. Sometimes that's creating their own team building things. That's creating their own idea generating groups or opportunities where they are just like hanging out at the bar or hanging out at a trivia night, because our team loves trivia nights over here. And they start talking. They're like, oh, well, somebody brings up an issue they had at work and somebody's like, well, did you think of this? Or what if we do this? And then suddenly they bring that back to the office, or they're working with people they didn't think they were going to work with. And that diversity of ideas and input, that ability to be influenced as a leader, is what actually creates the powerful growth that drives the business. So,
Yeah, I mean, I forget where I think I heard it at a conference or something a while back, but somebody said, two people having a discussion about one thing, can give growth, and you can see some improvement. You add a third or a fourth person in there, and it grows exponentially, because what ends up happening is, and we've all been in situations like you're describing, right, where one person makes a comment, and we talk about um, this we're talking about some topic, and then somebody says, well, I heard this. Well, that sparks a thought in the third person. I also heard something, but here's what I also heard. And then the first guy says, well, but I heard this. And then the gal says, well, I heard that, and it's this compounding effect that people are having. And as the group begins to all throw ideas in, at the end, what you have left is so much more than what one or two people could have come up with on their own, right? And I think that's the idea of allowing teams to find solutions. It's not my job as a leader to find the solution. It's my job to create an environment so that they can find those solutions. They feel free to find that solution. Ultimately, that's the objective. That's the goal for any of us as leaders, is to have this vibrant back and forth discussion, this exchange of ideas back and forth that ultimately helps the whole organization. I mean, why would I want to stifle that?
no. Yeah. And it's really incredible when, and I think we mentioned this in either our first or second episode, or you did, when you focus on doing the right thing with the business, like you focus on your purpose and the alignment and things like that, versus just trying to drill through for the money or the productivity or this or that or whatever. When you focus on really creating that culture and that environment that allows the group to thrive, how easily the rest just kind of click into place. And it's one of those situations, if you create a culture that drives a community, that drives thought engagement, and you open it up and you start to teach employees that the more ideas they bring to the table, the further we get, like the more that they think and open themselves up to doing that kind of thing. Even
Yeah,
some people doubt, like, oh, can I contribute to this conversation? Well, probably more than you know, right? And
right.
get them contributing. It's crazy. It's like you said, it is not adding, it's an exponential process. It's even more powerful than multiplying. It just is going to continuously build upon
Yeah,
itself.
I really agree with that. I mean, and I guess that's kind of the whole point behind that I was talking about, and ultimately about delegation, is when you delegate, what you're basically doing is you're taking a particular role and you're handing it as like a gift to this other person, and you're saying, look, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but I'm really excited to watch and see what happens when you create something from this, right? And when people all feel like, everybody in the group feels like I have that ability, there becomes an organic collaboration between people, and what ends up being created and left behind is so much more than what you ever envisioned, right? I think another thing that happens, that I see that happens with leaders, is a kind of situation where when they want to hold on to something so tightly and they won't let go of it, um, it really can ultimately, at the end of the day, become a negative and detrimental to the organization. one of the practices that I have with smaller or younger type of entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, younger entrepreneurs who maybe haven't had a lot of experience, right, with business before, right? And I'll ask it, and I'll be talking with them, and you know, you've got to do certain kinds of things to grow your business, but we're assuming that their businesses are growing, you know, and a lot of these guys are and gals are people that I talk to in my networking infrastructure, right? That we very vibrant networking, and so they're doing well, but that's kind of the good news, bad news. You know, I'll start talking to them and I say, so how things going? Oh man, I got so much business. I'm working like 12, 14 hours a day. Okay, well, that's not sustainable on anybody's level. I don't care who you are, working 12 to 14 hours a day, you know, full out, you're going to burn out. And when you burn out, so is the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions I ask them usually is I mean, given the situation, obviously, but one of the questions I ask them is, okay, so tell me all the things that you do. Now, this is something I think we've all heard at one time or another we should do, you know, write down everything that I'm doing, you know, and make sure I understand what it is my day looks like, right? But very few people do it.
Mm-hmm.
This is my discovery is that very few people actually do it. It's an interesting exercise when you do it. It's kind of scary. I'll be completely honest. When I started doing it for myself, I was like, okay, I got to stop this list at some place because it's getting ridiculous, right? But here's the thing. Once you have that list in front of you, then you start prioritizing that list. What are things that really I don't like to do, right? Well, and let's say you have 10 things that you do every day, right? Or that really occupy your time. I'm going to bet probably 7 of them are things you don't like to do. You know, I'm just using 10 and 7 as an example. But I'm betting that there's only like 1, 2, 3 things that you really enjoy doing. So then my question is, why are you doing those 7 things? Well, because they have to be done. I agree, they have to be done. But why are you doing those things? And what I'm trying to do is get these people to understand there are resources, even if you're not hiring people, there are so many third-party resources for you. Okay, I got to do the social media. No, you don't. There are people out there who will do social media for you at a fraction of the cost that it's costing you. What about my accounting? There are bookkeepers out there that will handle your books for you. You know, I mean, you can just go right down the list. There are people who will do it much more efficiently, with a whole lot less cost. And here's the thing. I ask them, I said, all right, look, let's just say for sake of argument, you took those 7 things and you added up the amount of time per day that you spend on these things, whether it's accounting or payroll or marketing or whatever it is. How much time would you save? Oh man, out of a 14-hour day, I'd probably save 7 hours. Really? So in other words, you're going to give this to somebody. How much is that time worth to you? You know, well, I got to, you know, but I can't do it because they don't have people who can do that. Can you train people how to do that? Can you take the time to start training people to do those different things and then let them do it? Or can you push it off to a third party who actually does know how to do it and probably knows how to do it better than you do, right? Like accounting would be a good example. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can crunch numbers, but you know what? I didn't get my education in accounting and book, you know, there are people who do that for a living. I'm going to give that to them to do, right? And when you do that, now I take that 7 hours if you want, which I would not recommend, but nonetheless, you have now 7 hours to really focus on the thing that you want, the 2 or 3 things that you really want to do, the 2 or 3 things that are critical for you. Here's the really interesting thing. Let's say you have that 7 hours left over that you would have spent on these other 3 things. Guess what? You're not going to spend 7 hours on those 3 things. Because now you're only focusing on 3 things, you're being very, very strategic and you're giving your energy to those 3 things. And that exponential compounding effect happens in those three things. And now you're not spending 7 hours, you're maybe spending 5 or 6 hours doing those things. You now have a life back. And guess what? You have an organization that's now thriving. Most people just are afraid of hiring new people or farming out certain aspects of their business because they're afraid they're going to lose control. No, you still have control. You just don't have to do all the work, right? And that's where I see a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. They just feel like I've got to do all this myself. No, you don't.
I think that's a huge misconception. But if you think about somebody who's, oh, like the baker example, they came in, they're really good at baking. They're trying to do everything at once to make this business succeed, but they're still really good at baking, and accounting or all this other stuff isn't their forte. And they're not outsourcing it. It's like, why didn't you just go bake for somebody else? If you want to focus on that one thing and you don't want to actually focus on your business by delegating, like that's how if you want to
Right,
focus on building a business, part of that, a large part of that is being able to delegate and pick your people to team up with and work with to build it. If you just want to like be you doing that one thing, then you should probably go work for somebody else or be an independent contractor or do something that's, you know, like
yeah,
because running a business, it requires this. It's not an optional thing that you say, oh, well, I don't need to do that. I don't need to grow that fast or do things like you said. Burnout sets in and it doesn't just destroy, your mindset or make you tired. It crushes your ability to work. It crushes your mood. It brings down your home life. Like,
yeah,
you can't afford it,
yeah.
not to do that to yourself.
Yeah, I see this happening repeatedly. I don't know. It's just interesting that it happens so often. And there's so much information out there and so much teaching and education and learning that you can engage in. That all that are saying the same thing. Don't do this. They're all saying what I'm saying. I'm not saying anything new. This is something it's a common thought process that's out there. I mean, I'm not the only one saying this. I mean, in fact, I'm probably the last one saying it. There's like 100 other people who have said it before me, but we stop listening. We just go, no, I'm different. No, you're not. You are unique, but when it comes to the effects of this, you're not any different. It's going to have the same impact on you as it had on 100, 1,000, 100,000 other people before you. It's and honestly, look, I had to learn it the hard way, and maybe that's the end of the day. That's kind of what happens. We have to all learn this the hard way. But my hope is that I can tell people, look, don't do what I did. I screwed up, man. I drove myself into the ground before I figured out what the problem was. And once I did, it's liberating. I mean, because now my whole world is around creating this environment that this amazing team can just do what they do. People will ask me anymore, like, well, do you know about this account or that account? No, I have no idea. Well, why not? It's your business. Yeah, but you know what? I don't need to know about the accounts. If I need to know something about account, I can go talk to, one of my team members or, I don't need to know that. My job is to make sure that they're able to do their jobs as well as they can to the best of their ability, that they can be creative, that they can be successful. That's my job.
Mhm.
Period. And it's freeing when you get to that point. But
I have to
mistakes.
say, yeah, I've seen a post about the same exact thing where it was on LinkedIn. It's a relatively popular account, so there has a lot of comments on it. And it was one of those talking about, especially the leaders and the entrepreneurs are really bad about working 80 plus hours a week, every single week, trying to grind. And that becomes such a toxic mentality, is to basically grind away your life. And in the comments, there were people defending their desire to work from sunup to sundown 7 days a week. And they said, well, this is just what I like to do, blah, 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 blah. And they're so set in it. You cannot change their mind. They don't care about the logic. They don't care about the people with a lot more experience have been there, done that, know the result, but they are so set on defending this kind of fast train to burnout that they're on. And it is insane. It's like there's times and places where you're going to work harder, where you're going to put a little more hours in a
Oh,
week,
yeah.
but it shouldn't be every single week. It shouldn't be every single day, because if you are, then somebody else should be working with you, at least one other person. You should be delegating some of that because you're doing too much. Like it's not a one person job
Well, and
then.
here's the thing, when you ask those same people, what is it you're spending your time on, right? Okay, I mean, let's do an inventory. Let's find out what is it you're really spending your time on. And when you start doing this inventory, what you find is that about 80% of what you do produces about 20% value to the company because you're doing it, not somebody who is focused exclusively on that one area. You know, it's the old 80-20 rule, right? Let's spend 20%, 80% of my time working on the 20%. I'm screwing this up. Working on 20% that's going to give me the 80% result, right? That's what I need to be focusing on. But unfortunately, as an entrepreneur, we spend all our time on the other 80%. And we don't have time left over for the 20. And we say, but I got to do this because I got to get to this 20. Then stop doing the 80 and focus on the 20. Let somebody else do the 80 so that you can get that result. You're the rainmaker. You're the one that needs to be out there bringing in the business, creating the connections, creating the environment, setting the culture for the company. I mean, that's your job. But unfortunately, we get so distracted and we think that being busy somehow equates to being successful or somehow equates to being, somehow productive. You're not being productive. If you're spread so thin that you can only use a little bit every day at something, you're not being productive. You're just not. And you need to allow yourself to push that stuff onto other people so that they can be productive because they're only focusing on one or two things, and that you can focus on your one or two things, which are really creating the big hit for the whole company, right? That's what you're looking to do. And unfortunately, I keep seeing it over and over and over again. And I wish I could just go and grab people and go, no, stop doing that. You're killing yourself and you're killing your company.
Exactly. Yep. And that really is everything that it boils down to. And that is, you can tell the great leaders from the people trying to lead in their ability to delegate and then support. And it's all hand in hand. You can't just be like, oh, I'm a leader, but really not lead and not give responsibility and not trust your team. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
all right. Well, I mean, that's a great episode. We've boiled down to a lot of stuff, and really probably one of the biggest sticking points that exhausts so many entrepreneurs is this ability to delegate or not. So opening this up and talking about for this episode, I think has been extremely helpful. So thank you
Good.
for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm enjoying this.
All right. Well, that's it for our episode 3. We've got one more in this series, and I'm super excited to jump in. So we will see you all next week.